So yeah, Ready and Dawn. So of course, same world Tellius, and same in general set of problems. Obviously the main big problem with Ashnard has been taken care of, but in this game there is still obviously much more unraveling things that were established in Path of Radiance, and of course one of them is eventually leading towards the Great War between the Laguz and Beork, and they are all fighting each other relatively relentlessly. Not all of them, but a very large chunk of them, a very, very large chunk of them, enough to overwhelm and completely engulf the entire continent in complete, utter warfare, which is obviously an important thing with Laurent's medallion. But regardless of what Laurent's medallion is, it is, of course, the fire emblem in this game. But the person who the medallion is named after, Laurent, of course, is a very important character in both Tellius games that you don't learn about until pretty much the very, very end of the game. Of course, he goes by the name of Sephiran, the Prime Minister of Benyon. So Sephiran's goal is, of course, to eliminate the humans, the Beork, and, of course, the Laguz as well. And, Sephiran living a very long time. He's certainly been through a lot and experienced a lot, ever since the roughly 1,000 years or so that general type of time frame that will cause him to view many different ordeals and types of events and whatnot, and all those ordeals, the fightings, the lynchings, the endless repeating of very, very simple and barbaric quandaries between humans and Laguz, and eventually he couldn't exactly take it no more. And of course the Herons, well, they're known for being very in tune with the balance of things, the natural force, the natural way of things, and of course Sephiran being able to feel all this stuff and would cause him a very, very large swell of emotions. And of course, with the Serenus massacre, it put him over the edge, and that caused him to want to wipe everything out and start anew. So, one thing about Sephiran is that he shows that he does in fact very much care, and honestly, he did care very much a lot for Yune, and Yune has shown that he does also have a lot of care for the peoples of Tellius and whatnot, even despite some of their very unfortunate miscomings and whatnot. And Yune, of course, she is prone to acting out, but she is also prone to show great care, compassion, and a lot of jubilance in regards to the peoples of Tellius and whatnot. And that is nice, and of course, but either way, it is understandable why Sephiran, the pain and suffering, all the unnecessary death and strife, the slavery, and all the other unfortunate misgivings and miscomings, why they would be too much for him, and why he would want to choose the solution of just wiping them out and having Ashura start over with everyone. But regardless of all that, he doesn't exactly choose the best master. Ashura, she is very, of course, meant to be calculating and very objective in the way she does things. And unfortunately, Sephiran himself, he believes that, as he says, he is simply wiping out all the inferior life forms in Tellius, and that isn't exactly someone who, is resolved to, care about the world anymore. Sephiran's clearly given up on himself, and he's clearly given up on all the peoples of Tellius, and in a sense, even though he is still trying to stop Ike and Micaiah and everyone else from reaching Ashura, ultimately, it kind of feels as if he is, in fact, basically, giving up his life, and he basically looks like he realized that he was going to lose the moment, everyone else stepped foot, on this floor of the tower. But either way, of course, it's up to Ike and friends to decide that everyone's life should be valued in relative equalness, and thus give a much greater world for the people of Tellius to live in. Though of course it is still interesting the fact that, well, only Laguz and Beork, well, they were the only ones that were petrified in Ashra's judgment. But most of the other wildlife, as you would put it, every other animal is spared in Ashra's judgment, as well as, of course, the branded. But Micaiah herself does acknowledge that, during the petrified state of the world, that things are a lot more peaceful now, and with the birds chirping and the deer running about, as you would put it, there is obviously a certain sense of utter peace that has washed over the world. But of course, she does go and find her resolve, and she does fight Ashra to save the people. But still, it is interesting to acknowledge that the main character of the game, in different circumstances, she would feel totally comfortable in living in a world without people. But that is neither here nor there. And as for Micaiah herself, obviously she is the main protagonist of Radiant Dawn. Of course, known for being a very compassionate character in her game. Obviously, she is. Obviously, she's established early to hate the word subhuman, and obviously, shows that level of compassion to the Laguz, even in Dayan, the most racist country in the game, of course. And she does still, care about the people of Dayan, of course, even despite all of that unfortunate situation, of course. And well, Dayan, I don't know if they're exactly more racist than Benyon, simply due to Benyon's, policies of hierarchy and their theocratic ways, and the senators that run much of the show there. But you sort of get the point. There's still a lot of very obvious tension and bad things that need to be sorted out in Dayan in regards to Laguz and Beork relationships, but that's not totally the point. Of course, Micaiah's ability sacrifice allows her to give up much of her life force in order to heal others, whether they be Beork or Laguz. But of course, it takes much out of her, and obviously she has to be healed back up. She has to rest, or get healed by another healer. And her ability, obviously in game, is very valuable. It's very coveted, being able to heal pretty much anyone, just simply by touching them, by giving her, I guess, her soft graces, as you would put it. Obviously that's a very special ability, but at the same time, in regards to vitality, of course, that takes a lot out of her. It takes most of the life force out of her, but she can ultimately, even if she's knocked down to 1 health, she can still get healed back up and continue her life on, just as she normally would. And that is definitely interesting, because obviously vitality, you have to be very, happy and healthy to have a properly good vitality. But at the same time, Micaiah, being very compassionate and very much caring a lot about the people around her and stuff, and passion, it's not something that comes easy. You have to properly insulate it. Passion is difficult, and passion requires much effort, and that's very cool and all, but at the same time, if you're overworked and if you put too much effort into the wrong place, then ultimately you end up draining yourself, and that can of course kill you. And so it's an interesting quandary in regards to how much passion you put into things versus sometimes how much effort you put into things. And obviously it's generally better to put more passion into things, more more of that type of thing. But sometimes there are difficult situations, and ultimately there are people that you care about who are also put into difficult situations, and sometimes you're forced to make tough decisions instead of chasing passions and other types of things. That sometimes you're forced to go down routes and do things you're not always exactly fond of. Like Micaiah wasn't exactly fond of the wasn't exactly fond of fighting under Benion's oath, and she wasn't exactly the greatest fan of using some of the tactics that she did, like, of course, setting oil and setting the Pegasus Knights of Benion ablaze. That is obviously quite some monstrous tactics, but still, the whole effort versus passion, sort of dilemma and quandary, it is definitely interesting in regards to vitality. But either way, we don't have much time to dwell on this. But Ike ultimately shows that he cares about the Bayark and the Lagoos, pretty much just as much as Sephran once did, and well, ultimately he will not betray his friends under any circumstances. And yeah, to put it simply, Ike's resolve, and everything about it, it gets them through the day, and ultimately Astra is, calculating and very straight and narrow, cold-minded, sort of mindset about the world and its peoples. Yeah, they are ultimately defeated, and there is an opportunity for Bayark and Lagoos to get along, and hopefully, make amends in some ways. But either way, that's of course the end of Radiant Dawn. So let's move on. So we're gonna skip over the Arcania games and Awakening as well. Awakening is definitely very interesting and quite important in regards to this topic of vitality and stuff, but that will be for another type of video. But we're moving on to Fates, where things do get actually quite interesting. Now, the characters in this game, they are famously a little bit out there, let's just say that. Sometimes you can call them one note, sometimes you can just call them very nonsensical, and other times, you can see where people might not have the highest opinion of Fate, given how not seriously the characters tend to make themselves. But regardless of reputations, characters, we have Niles. Niles needs no introduction, but apparently he did some very, very interesting things back in his day to survive, as he would put it. But he has a nice little tongue, a nice one that is very, very glistening and easy to loosen. Niles is a very loose person, let's just say that, even though some people think he likes it a little bit tighter, but who knows. But yeah, he still has a very interesting vocabulary, and his background, obviously people do grow up with those types of backgrounds, but they don't always turn out as unique as Niles does here. Sometimes they just turn out purely belligerent. So yeah, that is interesting. But of course there is also Xander. Mr. Justice is an Illusion. He's a character that certainly has a little bit of controversy around him in regards to how he was handled in the main story of parts of this game. But in terms of his supports, he's quite good. Of course, he realizes that Leo resents him, even though Leo puts on an air of being very very, very capable and competent, and very, very Leo seems very, very sure of himself, but Xander can sort of see through Leo's facade a little and realize that there is some resentment there and a little bit of anxiety on Leo's part, and that's cool. But also in the Camilla support, Xander obviously he puts on the air of being very intimidating and very unapproachable, but it's mostly to not give in, sort of set the precedent that he has to take his country very seriously, which has a lot of crime and other very mischievous dealings going on in it. And obviously they're in an active war with Hoshido, and he has to be very, very strong for Nor, and he takes his training very seriously. And he doesn't give any time for levity or any other other little frivolous distractions. But apparently he still does remember plenty of things about his younger siblings. Obviously he remembers Camilla's favorite foods, and some of Elise's favorite things, and obviously he pays attention to Leo as well. And he shows that he's very kind and compassionate, through these little support conversations. And he also, shows in the Laszlo support that the reason why he put Laszlo under house arrest was not purely to discipline him, but mostly because Xander doesn't want to have to deal with losing his retainers again, who died in combat, a little while ago, and that sort of pain really hurt at him and haunted him in a sense. So, yeah, he's a much more of a softie than his outward appearance, and in general, he's just a nice character. But of course, there are these slightly less savory parts of Xander's character, like saying that he would kill Beruka if she came in between him and Nor in their S support. But regardless, there is also the the fact that he hired Perry as his retainer. Of course, that has a little bit of a controversial edge to it. The fact that she has been known to kill for fun and blood sport and just generally not act mature in any real particular sense of the word. Why would Xander, someone as wise and generally have enough of a respectable attitude and respectable general personality in the first place? Why would he hire Perry as his retainer? I mean, obviously he gives his reasons. She obviously joined this little fighting tournament that was hosted, and Xander basically just saw a ton of potential in her, even though Perry wasn't fully prepared for that fighting tournament. He kind of just went on a whim, and that's where Xander got those ideas that Perry could be really strong in the future. And obviously combined with the fact that Xander doesn't want to lose any retainers, his retainers being as strong as possible. I guess that is the general justification for hiring someone as very, very unsavory as Perry. But also seeing the Ryoma support that he's not necessarily a huge fan of social obligations, so that is certainly something. But so for the final conversation here in Fates, we're going to look at Azuma and Beruka. Azuma is a monk who is known for not exactly acting the most monk-like. He's basically a troll in very bitter terms. He used to be even more loose of a person and of a tongue, and he has a little bit of a sharp and cutting wit, I guess you could call it. But ultimately, he did learn to be a monk and go through that type of ascetic training, and it mellowed him out a little bit. But ultimately, he is still a reasonable guy who does his best to heal people as much as he can on the battlefield. But of course, he is in contrast to Beruka, someone who grew up in a very, very tumultuous situation over in Nor, someone who has had a lot of issues with people who give her contracts, and having to fight to live, having that desperation always present in her life in the surroundings that she grew up in, where Azuma has had to deal with absolutely none of that. Another thing about Beruka is that she is, on the outside, she appears quite emotionless and cold, and she does take almost everything she does quite seriously. Of course, she does have her fairly soft moments and stuff, but it's not exactly in her to have a particularly profound funny bone, as the game likes to beat into you in her supports. But of course, with Azama, being who he is, being, I guess, fascinated by Beruka and some of her mannerisms, Azama is, I guess, fascinated enough to keep his sharp tongue in its little reins. But of course, he has the idea that people from Nor are much more true to their desires. They stick to them much more, I guess you could say. Maybe that means they are generally more passionate, who knows. But Beruka, of course, being a very highly renowned assassin, would she exactly take pleasure in doing something like that? And no, she of course does not take any satisfaction in doing such a thing. I mean, she was born into that life, and she may or may not have chosen to continue that life. She may have chosen to continue down the path of a killer, but ultimately she has had the opportunity to get out of the path of a killer, and she's now moved from an assassin to a retainer, and she is still very cold and emotionless, and yeah, that I guess bucks Azama's little idea that people from Nor follow their desires much more intently. But being said, Beruka is more, she's very, very good at what she does, and she knows a lot about, killing, going for the kills on humans and stuff. And you can see very clearly that, she does take her work very seriously as an assassin, but even though she takes no pleasure in it, but despite all that, she puts the pressure back on Azama in the conversation, who is pressing her quite a bit about her job. And Beruka says that Azama isn't taking life and death very seriously, because for Beruka, she had to do it in order to survive when she was younger. And obviously the dire circumstances of the kingdom of Nor and where she grew up, they obviously set a much different precedent for her entire life, and how she tends to view those types of things. And for Azuma, sometimes killing assassins and all this other little tomfoolery can be seen as like a TV show, a form of entertainment to him. The way of the assassin, the way of the killer, the way of the underworld, so to speak. It's all just entertainment to him. And in a sense, yes, Azama hasn't had to live directly in those circumstances and feel the heavy weight of life and death. The way both of them grew up in very, very different environments, and Beruka does acknowledge that Azama may have a right to judge her because of how much killing she's done, and maybe it's not good for Beruka to give in to those types of thoughts. And it's not always the best for you to judge the same crimes with the exact same sort of lens. It's part of the reason why justice systems I am very much not a fan of, but most common justice systems you see in the modern world, at least. But you can sort of get the point. They are very different, but ultimately Beruka will always be the one that will have the shame on her, simply because of the circumstances that she was brought up in. And either way, it's a nice reconciling between the two, so that they get to learn about each other. So yeah, it's a cool support, definitely. So I guess there was some good that has come out of Azuma's probing and very, very intense curiosity in other people. So yeah, that is nice. But actually, to finish out Fates, we'll leave off with Keaton and Felicia, that support conversation. So Keaton, of course, and his daughter Valoria, they love treasures, as you would put them, but they are various mishmash of things that they like little hairs, small dead bugs, or fur balls, those types of things, cloth scraps. There's a few little different things that they tend to like, that they value as treasures, that nobody else really particularly values. The vast majority of humans wouldn't, at least. But of course, Felicia, she's known to be clumsy, and she breaks some plates and stuff, as usual. She breaks the ice, as you would very much like to put it. But of course, Keaton is fascinated by Felicia's broken plates, because they break off in such a very distinct and sharp and jagged way when they hit the ground. And Keaton begins wagging his tail, and it really, really fascinates him in a sense. And Felicia is very confused about how he could possibly enjoy stuff like this. Of course, Keaton likes showing Felicia his weird little bugs that he picks up out of little mounds and holes and stuff, and other very, very questionable, sussy things that he finds and puts up her gullet. But of course, Keaton, he just wants Felicia to keep breaking plates and stuff, because her shards are so amazing, and he wants to look at them for all eternity. I can sympathize with him a little bit in that particular sense. I love weird chips, or sort of weird bubble wraps, stuff like that, or weirdly misshapen Coke cans, I guess you can call them. But yeah, I find interest in those things too. But of course, to each their own. And Keaton is fascinated, and Felicia is willing to help Keaton out. If she ever breaks any more plates, she's willing to give him let him know that there are free shards for the taking. And that is certainly very, very cool. But either way, of course, that ends Fates, and well, I can definitely talk more about some of these support conversations, but the biggest thing with Fates in regards to its characters is the fact that they are actually very, very unique, I guess you could say. Definitely non-traditional, like some of the other, support conversations in other games, like in FE7 or FE9. Things are, I guess, a lot more queer, as you can put it, in regards to this cast of characters, but that doesn't exactly deter from some interesting and sort of very provoking sort of encounters. But either way, I think the biggest thing in regards to the vitality of the characters in Fates is that they definitely have a fair bit of vitality, but ultimately, they don't exactly carry themselves with the most dire of circumstances. Of course, the war between Nor and Hoshido, obviously it is important, it's very serious, but in a sense, they don't exactly, I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's kind of like a mystery, I guess you can put it. Yeah, these characters, they definitely do have personality. I can't necessarily deny that. But, alright, so that's pretty much the end of the video, but touching on Three Houses, the game takes itself, quite seriously and, quite with a grandiose sort of tone. And, the characters themselves, they're already, quite deeply entrenched into, their own little regions and their own little, sort of weird ideologies that come with, their, broader ideologies that each kingdom adopts, and some of the very weird quirks that exist in each of the general regions and nations. But suffice it to say, the characters in this game, they're all fighting against each other instead of trying to, try to solve real issues, and that's not exactly a good thing when you want to have good vitality, let's just say that. And Engage, well, we'll cover Engage at a much later date, but that is it.